The stars had always called to humanity. For thousands of years, people looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there. They dreamed of distant worlds and alien civilizations. They built telescopes and rockets and space stations. They never stopped reaching upward. By the year 2347, those dreams had become reality. Humans lived on 12 different star systems. They had colonies on frozen moons, and desert planets, and worlds covered in endless oceans. Nearly 40 billion humans existed across the galaxy, spreading outward like seeds carried by the wind. But humanity was not alone in the universe. Far from it. The Galactic Council had watched them from the beginning. This ancient organization had existed for over 50,000 years, long before humans had even learned to make fire. 17 different species sat on the council, each one powerful in its own way. They had seen countless young races rise and fall. They had guided some and destroyed others. They considered themselves the keepers of galactic order. And now they had decided that humanity was a problem. Ambassador Chen stood in the great chamber of Thesser Prime, the station world where the council held its meetings. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. At 62 years old, she had spent her entire life in diplomatic service. She had negotiated with pirates and corporations and rival colonies. She had prevented wars and ended conflicts that had lasted for decades. Nothing had prepared her for this. The chamber was enormous, built to make visitors feel small and insignificant. The ceiling rose so high that it disappeared into darkness. The walls were made of some strange metal that seemed to absorb light. 17 platforms floated at different heights around the room, each one holding the representatives of a council species. Chen stood alone on a small platform in the center, surrounded by aliens on all sides. The Kethvari watched her from the highest platform. They were insect-like creatures with hard shells and many legs. Their eyes reflected no light, like pools of black oil. They communicated through clicks and whistles that their translators converted to words. Below them floated the Morpheans, beings made of living gel that constantly shifted and changed shape. They had no fixed form, no faces, no features that humans could read. They simply existed as masses of intelligent liquid. Oh, the Siraki perched on another platform, their bird-like bodies covered in feathers that shimmered with colors humans had no names for. They had ruled 100 systems before joining the council, and they had never forgotten their pride. Other species filled the remaining platforms. The massive Throck, built like mountains of muscle and stone. The delicate Whisperlings, so thin and pale they seemed almost transparent. The Mechanical Synthesis Collective, artificial beings who had long ago abandoned organic forms. And at the center of the highest platform stood High Arbiter Zolan. Zolan was unlike anything else in the chamber. His body was made of living crystal, a formation of geometric shapes that pulsed with inner light. He had served as High Arbiter for 3,000 years. In all that time, he had never shown mercy to any species that defied the council. Ambassador Chen of Earth, Zolan said. His voice came from everywhere at once, echoing off the walls. You have been summoned to receive the council's decree. Do you understand the honor that has been given to you? Chen kept her face calm. Inside, her heart was pounding. I understand, she said. I am here to listen. Good. Zolan's crystal form flickered with light. The council has observed your species for 300 years. We watched you leave your homeworld. We watched you spread to other stars. We watched you grow from a single planet to 12 systems. Chen said nothing. She knew better than to interrupt. At first we were curious, Zolan continued. Young races often expand quickly in their early years. It is natural. It is expected. But humanity has not slowed down. If anything, you move faster with each passing decade. The Kethvari delegate clicked something that the translator rendered as laughter. Like insect, it said. They breed and spread like insects. Chen felt her jaw tighten but did not respond. Your population grows at a rate we have not seen in 40,000 years, Zolan said. Your technology advances faster than any species in council records. And most concerning of all, you fight, constantly, among yourselves against others, for any reason or no reason at all. We have had our conflicts, Chen admitted, but we have also learned from them. We are not the same species we were a century ago. Perhaps, Zolan said, But the Council does not take chances with galactic stability. We have seen too many young races grow into threats. We have been forced to eliminate too many civilizations that refuse to accept their place in the natural order. The word eliminate hung in the air like a death sentence. The Council has decided, Zoltan announced, humanity will surrender its outer colonies. You will keep your home system and 2 others of your choosing. The remaining 9 systems will be placed under Council administration. Chen felt the blood drain from her face. 9 systems. Billions of people. Furthermore, Zoltan continued, humanity will accept protectorate status under Council governance. Your fleet will be reduced to 50 vessels, sufficient for system defense but nothing more. Your technological development will be monitored by Council observers. All right, any research deemed dangerous will be stopped. You're asking us to give up everything we built, Chen said. Her voice remained steady, but only through years of practice. We are not asking, Zoltan replied. We are informing. This is the Council's decree. You have 1 standard cycle to comply. And if we refuse? The chamber fell silent. The alien representatives shifted on their platforms, exchanging glances that Chen could not read. No species has refused the Council in 30,000 years, Zoltan said. The last one that tried no longer exists. Their worlds are empty now. Their cities turned to dust, their names forgotten by history. Chen took a deep breath. May I ask why? Why now? We have done nothing to threaten the Council. We have stayed in our own territory. So we have traded peacefully with other species. You misunderstand, Zoltan said. This is not punishment for something you have done. This is prevention of something you will do. The Council has learned that young races with your characteristics always become threats eventually. Your aggression, your ambition, your refusal to accept limitations. These traits cannot be allowed to mature. So you punish us for crimes we haven't committed. We protect the galaxy from crimes that would otherwise be inevitable. Zoltan's form pulsed with cold light. This is not cruelty, Ambassador. This is wisdom. Accept the Council's guidance, and humanity will survive. Resist, and you will join the countless species who thought they could stand against us. Chen stared up at the crystalline being. In that moment, she understood something important. And the Council did not hate humanity. They did not fear humanity. They simply did not consider humanity important enough to hate or fear. To them, humans were like weeds in a garden, something to be controlled before they spread too far. I need to consult with my government, Chen said finally. This decision is too important for me to make alone. Of course, Zoltan agreed. You have 30 rotations to deliver Earth's response. The Council will await your return. Chen bowed slightly and turned to leave. As she walked toward the chamber's exit, she passed close to a group of Kethvari delegates. They were clicking among themselves, and her translator picked up fragments of their conversation. We'll submit, one was saying. They always do. Such a waste of time, Paninon, another replied. We should simply crush them now and be done with it. The arbiters prefer the appearance of choice. It makes the records cleaner. Chen kept walking, her face showing nothing. But inside, something cold and hard was forming in her chest. It was not fear. It was not despair. It was anger. The transport ship that carried Chen back to human space was small and fast, designed for diplomatic missions. She sat alone in her cabin for most of the journey, staring at the stars streaming past the window. Her aide, a young man named Marcus, knocked on her door halfway through the trip. Ambassador, we've received word from Earth. The Secretary General wants a full briefing as soon as you arrive. They're assembling the full assembly. Good, Chen said. They need to hear this directly. Marcus hesitated. Ma'am, if I may ask, how bad is it? Chen looked at him. Marcus was 28 years old. He had grown up on a colony world, one of the 9 systems that the Council wanted to take. His parents still lived there. His sister had just had her first child there. It's bad, Chen said, but we're not dead yet. She turned back to the window. In the darkness between stars, she thought about everything the Council had said. They called humanity aggressive. They called humans dangerous. They said that humanity's traits could not be allowed to mature. Perhaps they were right. Perhaps humans were dangerous. But dangerous could mean many things. A fire was dangerous. It could destroy everything it touched. But it could also provide warmth and light. It could forge steel. It could clear away the old and make room for the new. The council had spent 50,000 years making sure no fire ever burned too bright. They had smothered countless species, keeping the galaxy safe and stable and utterly controlled. Maybe it was time for something to burn. Chen arrived at Earth 3 days later. The planet hung in space like a blue and green jewel, surrounded by orbital stations and defense platforms. Ships came and went in constant streams, carrying goods and people between the stars. 40 billion humans lived across 12 systems. They had built cities on alien worlds and stations in the void between stars. They had fought wars among themselves and made peace again. They had faced plagues and disasters and challenges that would have broken lesser species. And now an alien council wanted them to give it all up, to become pets, act to accept chains they had never worn before. Chen's shuttle landed at the United Nations complex in Geneva. Security teams escorted her through hallways filled with anxious officials. Everyone wanted to know what had happened. Everyone wanted to know what the council had said. She told them nothing. This news had to be delivered once, to everyone, so there could be no confusion about what humanity faced. The assembly hall was packed when she entered. Representatives from every nation and colony sat in their assigned places. Cameras broadcast the session to every human world. Billions of people were watching. Secretary General Amara Okonkwo stood at the central podium. She was a tall woman with dark skin and a presence that commanded attention. She had led humanity through 3 major crises during her term. This would be the 4th. EU Ambassador Chen, Okonkwo said, please deliver your report. Chen walked to the podium. She looked out at the sea of faces, human faces from 100 different backgrounds and cultures. They were all waiting, all hoping. The Galactic Council has issued an ultimatum, Chen said. Her voice was steady and clear. We have 30 days to respond. She told them everything. The demand for their colonies, the requirement for protectorate status, the reduction of their fleet, the monitoring of their technology, the threat of extinction if they refused. When she finished, the hall was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Then the shouting began. Representatives jumped to their feet, yelling over each other. Some demanded immediate surrender. Others called for war. Arguments broke out across the chamber as old rivalries and new fears collided. Okonkwo let them shout for exactly 1 minute. Then she raised her hand. Enough, she said. Her voice cut through the noise like a blade. We will have order, or we will have nothing. The hall quieted. People returned to their seats, though the tension remained thick enough to taste. We have 30 days, Okonkwo said. 30 days to decide the fate of our species. I will hear all arguments, but I will warn you now, whatever we decide together. We will not be divided, not now. She looked out at the assembly, her eyes hard and bright. We are humanity, she said. We have faced worse than this, and we are still here. In the silence that followed, Chen felt something shift in the room. It was small at first, barely noticeable, but it grew with each passing second. Fear was still there, heavy and cold, but something else was growing underneath it. Defiance. Humanity had spent its entire history fighting against impossible odds. They had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that should have destroyed them. They had clawed their way up from caves to the stars, and now some alien council thought they would simply kneel? The debate was just beginning. The decision was far from made, but Chen could feel it in the air, in the straightening spines and lifting chins of the representatives around her. Whatever happened next, humanity would not go quietly. The council had made a terrible mistake. They had given humanity time to think, time to prepare, time to remember who they were, and humanity had a long memory for those who tried to put them in chains. The stars waited in cold silence as the clock began to count down. 30 days until humanity had to answer. 30 days until the galaxy would learn what humans were truly capable of. 30 days until everything changed. The first week after Ambassador Chen's announcement was chaos. News of the Council's ultimatum spread across human space like wildfire. Billions of people watched the recordings of Chen's speech. They saw her stand before the assembly and deliver the impossible demands. They heard about the threat of extinction, about the 30-day deadline, about everything humanity stood to lose. And then they began to argue. On Earth, protests filled the streets of every major city. Some people carried signs demanding peace at any cost. Others burned effigies of the council species and called for war. Fights broke out between groups with different opinions. Police struggled to maintain order as tensions rose higher each day. On the colony worlds, the situation was even worse. The 9 systems that the Council wanted to take were home to billions of people. These were not just numbers on a report. They were families and communities and entire civilizations that had been built over generations. The colonists had cleared alien jungles and terraformed dead moons and turned hostile worlds into homes. Now they were being told to leave everything behind, to abandon their homes, to become refugees in their own species. Many refused to accept it. Militia groups formed on several worlds. Veterans of old conflicts dusted off their weapons and began training their neighbors. The message was clear. If the politicians decided to surrender, the colonists would fight on their own. And in the halls of the United Nations, the debate raged without end. Secretary General Okonkwo had promised to hear all arguments, and she kept her word. Representatives spoke for hours, sometimes days, laying out their positions. The world watched as humanity tried to decide its own fate. The first faction called themselves the pragmatists. They believed that surrender was the only logical choice. Their leader was Director Heinrich Voss, a thin man with cold eyes who had spent his career in military intelligence. "Let me be absolutely clear," Voss said during one session. "We cannot win this war. It is not difficult or costly or unlikely. It is impossible." He brought up holographic displays showing the Council's known military strength. The numbers were terrifying. "Well, the Council commands approximately 3 million warships," Voss explained. "These are not small patrol vessels. These are capital ships, each one capable of destroying a city. Some of their dreadnoughts are larger than our biggest space stations." He changed the display to show humanity's fleet. "We have 1,200 warships, 1,200 against 3 million. That is not a battle. That is a slaughter." Voss let the numbers hang in the air before continuing. "I know this is not what people want to hear. I know it feels like cowardice. But survival is not cowardice. The Council has given us a path forward. Yes, it means giving up much of what we have built. Yes, it means accepting limits on our future. But we would still exist. Our children would still be born. Our species would survive." He looked around the assembly hall. "Pride is not worth extinction. If we fight this war, we will lose. And when we lose, there will be nothing left. No colonies, no Earth, no humanity. Just empty worlds and forgotten names." The pragmatists had many supporters. Business leaders worried about the economy, parents worried about their children. Military officers who understood the numbers sided with Voss, even if it broke their hearts to do so. But they were not the only voice. The second faction called themselves the Defiance Movement. Their leader was Senator Maria Santos, a woman whose grandfather had fought in the last great war on Earth, and whose father had been among the first colonists on a new world. "Director Voss speaks of survival," Santos said when it was her turn. "But what kind of survival? What are we saving if we give away everything that makes us human?" She pulled up different images. Families on colony worlds, children playing in alien forests, cities rising under strange suns. 9 systems, Santos said. 20 billion people. These are not statistics. These are our brothers and sisters, our sons and daughters. The Council wants us to abandon them, to tell them that their homes no longer belong to them, to make them refugees because some alien tribunal decided we are too successful. Her voice grew harder. "And what happens after we surrender? The Council will monitor our technology. They will limit our fleet. They will control our future. We will not be a free species anymore. We will be pets. Useful animals that the Council keeps around because we have not caused enough trouble to be put down." Santos shook her head. "Director Voss asks us to be pragmatic, to accept reality. But the reality is this. The Council has never let a protectorate species become free again. Once we accept their chains, we wear them forever. Our children will wear them. Our children's children will wear them. 1,000 years from now, humanity will still be kneeling." She looked directly at Voss. "You say we cannot win this war. Perhaps you are right. But some things are worth fighting for even if you cannot win. Our ancestors knew this. They fought against empires and tyrants and impossible odds. Most of the time they lost. But sometimes they won. And when they won, they changed history. Santos raised her chin. Oh, I would rather die standing than live on my knees. And I believe I am not alone. The defiance movement had its own supporters. Young people who had never known limits on their future. Colonists who had built their lives with their own hands. Veterans who remembered what it felt like to fight for something worth fighting for. The two factions argued back and forth as the days passed, but the debate was missing something important. Everyone talked about whether to fight, but no one talked about how to fight. No one talked about whether victory was actually possible. That changed on the 10th day. General Marcus Stone was not a politician. He had never wanted to speak before the assembly. But Secretary General Okonkwo had asked him directly, and he could not refuse. Stone was 65 years old, with gray hair cut short and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. He had served in the military for 40 years. He had commanded ships and fleets in entire theaters of operation. He had won battles that should have been lost and lost battles that should have been won. Now he stood before the assembly with nothing but the truth. I have heard both sides of this debate, Stone said. Director Voss is correct about the numbers. Senator Santos is correct about the stakes. But you are all missing something important. He paused. You are all assuming that war means fighting the way the Council expects us to fight. Fleet against fleet, ship against ship, strength against strength. If that is how we fight, we will lose. That is simply a fact. Stone changed the display behind him. Instead of showing fleets and numbers, it showed something else, a map of human history. Humanity has spent its entire existence fighting. We have fought each other for land, for resources, for ideas, for survival. We have become very, very good at it. Not because we are stronger than other species, not because we have better weapons, but because we never stop adapting. He pointed to different moments on the timeline. When our enemies had better swords, we invented better armor. When they had better armor, we invented guns. When they had more soldiers, we invented better tactics. When they held every advantage, we fought dirty. We used ambushes and traps and deception. We attacked supply lines and assassinated leaders and turned their own soldiers against them. Stone looked out at the assembly. The Council has not fought a real war in 30,000 years. They have conquered weaker species and destroyed those who refuse to submit. But they have never faced an enemy who fights the way humanity fights. They have never faced an enemy who refuses to accept the rules they expect. He brought up a new image, organizational charts of the Council's military structure. The Council's forces are massive, but they are also slow. Their command structure has not changed in millennia. Their tactics have not evolved because they have never needed to evolve. They expect their enemies to form battle lines and fight directly. They have no experience with guerrilla warfare. They have no experience with asymmetric combat. They have no experience with an enemy who is willing to lose every battle and still win the war. A murmur ran through the assembly. People were listening now in a different way. I am not saying we can win this war, Stone continued. I am saying that the war Director Voss describes is not the only war possible. There are other ways to fight, and humanity has spent 10,000 years perfecting them. But Stone was not finished. He had saved the most important part for last. There is someone else who should speak to this assembly, he said. Someone who has information that changes everything. Dr. Yuki Tanaka walked into the chamber. Tanaka was small and quiet, the kind of person who disappeared in crowds. She wore simple clothes and no jewelry. Her hair was pulled back in a practical style. Nothing about her appearance suggested importance. But Tanaka was the director of the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, the successor to an organization that had invented the internet, stealth aircraft, and in a dozen other technologies that had changed human history. For 80 years, her organization had been working on something even more important, and now she was going to tell the assembly about it. What I am about to share is classified at the highest level, Tanaka said. Her voice was soft but clear. Until today, fewer than 100 people in all of human space knew about these programs, but the Secretary General has decided that you need to know. She activated her own displays. 80 years ago, we became aware that the Council was watching us. Their observation drones were hidden in asteroid fields and orbiting distant moons. They recorded everything we did. Every ship we built, every weapon we developed, every tactical doctrine we created. Tanaka paused. So we created a secret program. We built research facilities in places the drones could not see, inside black holes, in the spaces between dimensions, in locations that should not exist according to conventional physics. The assembly was completely silent now. In those facilities, we have spent 80 years developing technologies the Council does not know about. Weapons that do not play by the rules they expect. I cannot share details here, even now, but I can tell you this. We have not been idle. We have not been helpless. We have been preparing. Tanaka looked at Director Voss. You are correct that we cannot win a conventional war, but we are not going to fight a conventional war. We are going to fight a human war, and humans have never played by anyone else's rules. The debate shifted after that. For the remaining 20 days, the assembly discussed not just whether to fight, but how to fight. Military experts presented classified briefings on the technologies that Tanaka's organization had developed. Tacticians outlined strategies that had never been used in space warfare. Historians talked about past wars where smaller forces had defeated larger ones. The Council's ultimatum still loomed over everything. 3 million ships against 1,200. 50,000 years of dominance against 3 centuries of existence. The odds were still impossible by any reasonable measure, but humanity had never been reasonable. On the 28th day, Secretary General Okonkwo called for the final vote. We have heard all arguments, she said. We have considered all options. Now we must decide. Each representative will cast their vote. The choice is simple. Do we accept the Council's demands or do we refuse? One by one, the representatives voted. The process took hours. Every vote was recorded, every name noted for history. When the counting was finished, Okonkwo announced the results. The final count is as follows. In favor of accepting the Council's demands, 473 votes, against 480 votes. The assembly erupted. People shouted and cheered and wept. The margin was tiny, just 7 votes out of nearly 1,000. But it was enough. Humanity had chosen defiance. Secretary General Okonkwo waited for the noise to die down before speaking again. The decision has been made, and she said, now we must act on it. Ambassador Chen, you will return to Thesser Prime and deliver our response. General Stone, you will begin preparing our forces. Dr. Tanaka, you will deploy everything your organization has developed. She looked out at the assembly one last time. I will not lie to you. The path ahead is dark and dangerous. Many of us will not live to see its end, but we will walk it together as one species, united in the face of extinction. Her voice rose. The Council believes we are insects to be crushed. They believe we will kneel and beg for mercy. They believe we do not have the strength or the will to resist. Okonkwo smiled, and there was something fierce in it. They are wrong. 2 days later, Ambassador Chen stood once again in the great chamber of Thesser Prime. The 17 species of the Council watched from their platforms. High Arbiter Zolan waited at the center, his crystalline form pulsing with patient light. Ambassador Chen, Zolan said, you have returned with Earth's response. We are prepared to receive your submission. Chen activated a holographic projector. The image of Earth's flag appeared in the air before her, blue and green and bright against the darkness of the chamber. High Arbiter Zolan, Chen said, members of the Galactic Council, I come before you with humanity's official response to your ultimatum. The chamber was silent. Every alien eye was fixed on the small human woman standing alone in the center of their power. Chen took a deep breath. She thought about the billions of people watching this moment. She thought about the colonies that would become battlefields. She thought about the children who would grow up in a galaxy at war. And then she spoke 7 words that would change history. Humanity formally declares war on the Galactic Council. For a long moment, nothing happened. The words seemed to hang in the air, impossible and absurd. No species had ever declared war on the Council. Wars happened to species who defied them, not the other way around. Then Zolan's crystalline form flickered. It was the closest the ancient being could come to expressing surprise. You understand what this means? He asked. You understand that you are choosing extinction? Chen smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had accepted their fate and found peace in it. We understand what you believe this means, she said, but we have our own beliefs. And we believe that the future is not yet written. Zoltan's form pulsed brighter. You are making a mistake, Ambassador. A terrible mistake. The Council has destroyed civilizations far older and more powerful than yours. We have cleansed worlds and extinguished entire species. You cannot resist us. You can only delay the inevitable. Perhaps, Chen said, but we will delay it with everything we have. And who knows, perhaps the inevitable is not as inevitable as you think. She turned to address the entire chamber. To the species of the Galactic Council, humanity did not seek this conflict. We wanted only to live and grow and explore, as all species do. But you have given us a choice between slavery and death. We choose neither. We choose to fight. Chen deactivated the holographic projector. The next time we meet, it will be on the battlefield. I hope you are ready. She turned and walked out of the chamber without looking back. Behind her, the council erupted into chaos. Species who had not spoken to each other in centuries began shouting. The Kethavari demanded immediate retaliation. The Morpheans called for caution. The Sarakiae preened their feathers and spoke of honor. But High Arbiter Zoltan remained silent, watching the door through which the human ambassador had disappeared. For the first time in 3,000 years, he felt something he did not recognize. Later, he would realize it was uncertainty. The human had not begged. She had not pleaded. She had not shown any of the fear that every other species had shown when facing the Council's judgment. Instead, she had smiled and spoken of belief and walked away like she was the one with 3 million ships. It was confusing. It was illogical. It was, Zoltan admitted to himself, slightly unsettling, but it changed nothing. When the Council had crushed every species that had ever defied it, humanity would be no different. In a few years, perhaps a few decades at most, they would be another forgotten name in the long history of the galaxy. Zoltan was certain of it. He had never been more wrong about anything in his 3,000 years of existence. The Galactic Council did not waste time. 3 days after Ambassador Chen delivered humanity's declaration of war, the Council assembled its response. They chose the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet for the task. 800 warships, each one bristling with weapons that could crack planets. It was more firepower than most species had ever seen in their entire existence. Admiral Prethos of the Siraki was given command. He was a veteran of 100 campaigns, a warrior who had earned his rank through decades of service. His feathers were gray with age, but his eyes were still sharp, and his talons were still deadly. Prethos was not worried about the humans. How could he be? His fleet alone outnumbered their entire military. The Council had given him simple orders: pacify the human colony of New Jakarta, establish a forward base, and prepare for the systematic conquest of human space. He expected the operation to take 3 days at most. The 3rd Fleet traveled through hyperspace for 2 weeks, covering distances that would have taken years at normal speeds. Prethos spent the journey reviewing intelligence reports on humanity. He studied their weapons, their ships, their tactics. Everything he saw confirmed his initial assessment. The humans were aggressive but primitive. If their weapons were crude compared to Council technology, their ships were smaller and slower. They had no experience fighting against a superior enemy. This would be easy. The fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the New Jakarta system. Prethos stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Wing, watching through the massive view screen as the stars shifted from streaks back to points of light. New Jakarta was a green world, covered in forests and oceans. Orbital scanners showed cities on 3 continents, population centers holding millions of humans. But something was wrong. "Admiral," one of his officers reported, "we are not detecting any human ships in the system." Prethos tilted his head, a Siraki gesture of confusion. "None at all?" "None, sir. The orbital defense platforms are powered down. The space stations appear to be empty. We have attempted to contact the planet's government, but there is no response." This made no sense. Intelligence reports had indicated a significant human presence in this system. A defensive fleet, ground forces, millions of civilians. Where had they all gone? "Perhaps they fled," another officer suggested. "Abandoned the system when they learned we were coming." Prethos considered this. It was possible. Humans were known to be cowardly when faced with overwhelming force. Perhaps they had simply run away. But something felt wrong. The feathers on the back of his neck prickled with unease. "Proceed with caution," he ordered. "Launch scout ships to examine the planet. I want landing zones secured before we send in ground forces." The scouts launched and approached New Jakarta. They reported empty cities, deserted streets, buildings that looked like they had been abandoned in haste. Food was left on tables. Vehicles were stopped in the middle of roads. It was as if the entire population had simply vanished. The scouts found no traps, no ambushes, no sign of any defensive preparations. Just emptiness. Prethos relaxed slightly. The humans had run. They had seen the council's fleet coming and fled like prey before a predator. It was disappointing in a way. He had hoped for at least some resistance, some glory for his warriors. "Begin landing operations," he ordered. "Secure the major cities. We will use this world as our forward base." Hundreds of transport ships descended toward New Jakarta. They carried 50,000 Siraki soldiers, along with thousands of warriors from other council species. It was more than enough to hold any planet. The transports landed in the empty cities. Soldiers poured out, establishing perimeters and securing key locations. Officers reported that everything was proceeding smoothly. Within hours, the council controlled all 3 continents. Prethos allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The humans had given up without a fight. The campaign would be even shorter than he had expected. Then the ground exploded. It happened everywhere at once, in every city, on every continent. Buried charges detonated with the force of small suns. Antimatter warheads that the humans had hidden beneath their own buildings, their own streets, their own homes. The explosions consumed everything. Transports were vaporized. Soldiers were turned to ash. Command posts were wiped from existence. In less than 30 seconds, the council lost 40,000 soldiers. On the Eternal Wing, alarms screamed. Officers shouted reports over each other, trying to make sense of what had happened. "Admiral, we've lost contact with all ground forces. Massive energy readings from the surface. The cities are gone." They destroyed their own world. They buried antimatter charges and destroyed their own world. Prethos stared at the view screen in disbelief. Where cities had stood moments ago, there were now only craters of molten glass. The humans had not fled. They had evacuated their civilians and turned their entire colony into a trap. They had sacrificed their own world to destroy his landing forces. Before Prethos could process this, the tactical display lit up with new warnings. Multiple contacts emerging from the asteroid field. "Enemy ships detected behind the 4th moon. They're coming out of the planet's debris ring." Human ships appeared from everywhere. Not hundreds, but dozens. Small groups of 3 to 5 vessels that had hidden themselves throughout the system. They had been waiting for the Council fleet to spread out, to commit its forces to the planet, to become vulnerable. And now they attacked. The human ships did not form battle lines like Council forces always did. They did not advance in orderly formations or exchange fire at proper distances. They swarmed like insects, darting in from multiple directions at once, striking fast and retreating before the larger Council ships could respond. Their weapons were strange. Missiles that seemed to know exactly where to hit, and energy beams that cut through shields like they were not there. Kinetic projectiles accelerated to impossible speeds. The humans had been hiding their true capabilities for decades, and now they revealed them all at once. "Target the lead ship!" Prethos screamed. "All batteries! Focus fire!" The Eternal Wing turned its weapons on the nearest human vessel. 100 beam cannons fired at once, more than enough to destroy any ship in the galaxy. The human ship was not there. It had moved at the last instant, somehow knowing exactly when and where the attack would come. The beams struck empty space, and then the human ship fired back. A single missile, small and fast, slipped through the Eternal Wing's point defense systems. It struck the flagship's engine section and detonated. The explosion crippled the great ship's propulsion, leaving it dead in space. "Damage report," Prethos demanded. "Engines are gone, Admiral. We are adrift." Prethos could not believe it. One missile, one tiny human missile had crippled his flagship. All around him, the battle continued. The human ships struck and vanished, struck and vanished. They never stayed in one place long enough to be targeted. They never engaged ships directly when they could attack from behind. They targeted engines and command bridges and ammunition stores with perfect precision, and they talked. The humans broadcast on open channels, making sure every council ship heard the dying screams of their comrades. They sent messages mocking the Sarakiei, questioning their courage, their honor, their fitness to serve the council. The psychological attacks were as effective as the physical ones. Council ships that had stood firm against countless enemies began to panic. Captains made mistakes. Formations broke apart. The orderly fleet that had entered the system became a chaotic mess of ships trying to protect themselves. The battle lasted 18 days. 18 days of running and hiding and dying. 18 days of watching human ships appear from impossible hiding places and destroy vessel after vessel. 18 days of waiting for reinforcements that never came because the council had not expected to need them. When it was finally over, fewer than 200 ships remained from the original 800. The rest were destroyed or disabled, floating dead in the void between worlds. Admiral Prometheus was taken prisoner when human marines boarded the crippled Eternal Wing. He expected to be tortured or executed or made into an example. Instead, the humans treated him with respect. They gave him food and medical care in a clean cell. A human officer came to speak with him, a young woman with cold eyes and a polite smile. "We're going to send you back to the council," she told him. "We want you to deliver a message." Prometheus stared at her. "What message?" The woman leaned closer. "Tell them we're just getting started." The news of the Third Fleet's destruction spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Species that had lived under council rule for millennia watched the reports with disbelief. A human force less than 1/10 the size of the council fleet had not just defeated them, but humiliated them. The council tried to suppress the information, but it was impossible. Too many ships had sent distress signals. Too many survivors had seen what happened. The truth could not be hidden. On Thessar Prime, the council met in emergency session. For the first time in 30,000 years, the 17 species were afraid. High Arbiter Zolan listened to the reports from the front. He studied the tactical analyses that his officers presented. He watched recordings of human ships dancing through council formations like ghosts. "They fight without honor," a Kethavari general complained. "They refuse to face us directly. They hide and strike and run like cowards." "And yet they won," Zolan observed quietly. "Their cowardice seems remarkably effective." The Kethavari fell silent. "We underestimated them," Zolan continued. "We assumed they would fight the way every other species fights. We assumed they would face our superior numbers and realize they could not win. We assumed wrong." He turned to address the full council. "The humans do not fight wars to defend territory. They do not fight wars for honor or glory. They fight wars to win. They will use any tactic, accept any cost, endure any suffering. They do not care how they are remembered. They only care about victory." A Morphean representative rippled with concern. "Then how do we defeat them? If they will not fight fairly, if they refuse to accept the natural order of warfare, what can we do?" Zolan was silent for a long moment. "We must learn," he said finally. "We must study their tactics and adapt our own. We must stop assuming that our way is the only way. The humans have reminded us of something we forgot long ago. War is not a game with rules. War is survival." He looked around the chamber. "The Third Fleet was our warning. If we do not change, the next fleet will suffer the same fate, and the one after that, and the one after that. The humans will not stop. They will fight until they win or until they are destroyed." The council members shifted uneasily. They had not faced a real challenge in millennia. They had forgotten what it felt like to be in danger. "What do you suggest?" the Siraki representative asked. Zoltan's crystalline form pulsed with cold light. "We must crush them quickly, before they can spread their poison further. Every day this war continues, other species watch and wonder. They see the mighty council struggling against a young race. They begin to ask questions. They begin to have ideas." He raised one crystalline arm. "We will assemble the largest fleet in council history. Not hundreds of ships, but thousands. Not thousands, but tens of thousands. We will bring such overwhelming force that no tactic, no trick, no human cleverness can save them. We will burn their worlds one by one until nothing remains." The chamber was silent. And we will do it quickly, Zoltan added, before they teach the rest of the galaxy that the Council can be fought, before they give hope to every species we have ever conquered. The Council voted to authorize the new offensive. Within days, fleets from across the galaxy began moving toward human space. It would be the largest military operation in 50,000 years. But in the time it took to assemble that fleet, the humans were not idle. Word of the Third Fleet's destruction reached Earth 6 days after it happened. And the population celebrated in the streets. After weeks of fear and uncertainty, they finally had proof that the Council could be beaten. But General Stone did not celebrate. He sat in his command center, studying reports from the front, and he saw what others missed. "We won one battle," he told Secretary General Okonkwo. "One battle against one fleet. The Council has hundreds more. They will not make the same mistakes twice." "What do you recommend?" Okonkwo asked. Stone pulled up a map of human space. "We cannot defend everything. We do not have the ships, the soldiers, the resources. If we try to hold every system, we will lose them all." He highlighted several worlds. "We must choose what to sacrifice and what to save. We must evacuate civilians from the outer colonies and concentrate our forces. And we must make the Council pay for every system they take, bleed them until they decide the cost is too high." Okonkwo looked at the worlds he had marked for evacuation. Millions of people lived there. Entire civilizations that would have to be abandoned. "You're asking me to give up our people's homes?" "I'm asking you to save their lives," Stone replied. "The Council expects us to defend everything. They expect us to spread our forces thin and be destroyed piece by piece. We must do the opposite. We must be willing to lose ground to win time." It was a hard truth, but Okonkwo accepted it. Over the following months, massive evacuation efforts moved billions of people from the outer colonies to more defensible positions. Ships that might have been used for fighting instead carried families and refugees. The Council's forces advanced into human space and found empty worlds. Cities that had been evacuated, resources that had been stripped, infrastructure that had been destroyed. The humans gave the Council nothing but ashes. And whenever the Council stopped to consolidate their gains, the humans attacked. Not with fleets, but with small groups of ships that struck supply convoys and communication relays in isolated outposts. They made every occupation costly. They made every victory feel like defeat. The war that the Council expected to win in months stretched into years. The quick conquest became a grinding campaign. The humans refused to submit, refused to break, refused to acknowledge that they had already lost. And across the galaxy, other species watched. They saw the Council struggling against a race that should have been crushed in weeks. They saw that the impossible was possible. They began to wonder what might happen if they stopped being afraid. The fire that Zoltan had feared was spreading, and there was nothing he could do to put it out. 2 years into the war, the galaxy had changed. Humanity had lost 4 colonies and millions of lives. Entire worlds had been reduced to radioactive wastelands. Cities that had taken generations to build were gone in hours. The names of the dead filled databases that grew longer every day. But humanity had not broken. And against all odds, against every prediction, the Council was starting to crack. The first signs appeared among the Morpheans. They were a peaceful species who had joined the Council for protection, not conquest. They had never wanted to fight wars. They had never wanted to destroy civilizations. Now they were being asked to slaughter humans by the millions, and they did not have the stomach for it. Morphean captains began finding reasons to avoid combat. Their ships would arrive late to battles, or experience mysterious malfunctions that prevented them from firing. Their ground forces would secure areas that contained no enemies and leave the real fighting to others. The Council could not prove they were deliberately refusing to fight, but everyone knew the truth. The Kethvari were different. They fought eagerly, throwing themselves into battle with insect ferocity. But that eagerness came with a cost. The Kethvari had suffered the heaviest casualties of any Council species. Their breeding pools could not replace soldiers fast enough. Their homeworlds were growing restless. "We are sacrificing our children for this war," a Kethvari senator declared during a council session. "What do we receive in return? The humans have nothing we want. Their worlds are useless to us. Their resources are irrelevant. Why are we dying for nothing?" Other species had similar complaints. The war was costing more than anyone had expected. Resources that had been plentiful were becoming scarce. Trade routes that had been safe for millennia were now hunting grounds for human raiders, and the humans kept adapting. Dr. Tanaka's research teams had not stopped working since the war began. They analyzed every council weapon they captured, every piece of technology they salvaged from destroyed ships. Within months, human scientists had reverse-engineered systems that had taken other species centuries to develop. But that was not their greatest achievement. Their greatest achievement was the Achilles Protocol. The protocol started as a simple observation. Every council species had weaknesses. The Kethvari could not function below certain temperatures. The Siraki were vulnerable to specific sound frequencies. The Morpheans could be disrupted by certain electromagnetic patterns. Human scientists cataloged every weakness they could find. Human weapons designers created tools to exploit them. Human tacticians developed strategies tailored to each enemy. The war became more efficient. When human ships faced Kethvari forces, they targeted environmental systems and flooded enemy vessels with cold. When they faced Siraki, they broadcast frequencies that caused pain and disorientation. When they faced Morpheans, they used weapons that scattered their gelatinous bodies into helpless fragments. The council species had never faced an enemy who studied them so carefully. They had never imagined that their differences could be turned into vulnerabilities. But humanity's greatest weapon was not technology or tactics, it was hope. Across the galaxy, dozens of species lived under council rule. They had been conquered long ago, reduced to protectorate status, forced to serve masters they had never chosen. For millennia, they had accepted their fate because they believed resistance was impossible. Now they saw humans fighting the council and surviving. They saw council fleets defeated. They saw council species arguing and blaming each other for failures. They began to wonder if the impossible might be possible after all. Human agents reached out to these species in secret. They offered weapons and training. They shared intelligence about council movements. They promised that humanity would remember its friends when the war was over. Not every species agreed to help. Many were too afraid, too broken by generations of submission. But some said yes, and those who said yes began to act. Supply convoys were sabotaged from within. Classified information was leaked to human intelligence. Council officers found themselves betrayed by servants they had trusted for centuries. The rebellion was small at first, barely noticeable, but it grew. Every human victory inspired more species to take risks. Every council defeat proved that the masters were not invincible. The High Arbiter Zolan watched these developments with growing alarm. He had warned the council about this exact possibility. He had told them that the war needed to end quickly before its effects spread beyond human space. They had not listened. And now the consequences were becoming clear. "We face a crisis of faith," Zolan told the council during a closed session. "For 50,000 years, the galaxy has believed that we are invincible. That belief has been more powerful than all our fleets combined. Now that belief is dying. Species that would never have questioned us are asking dangerous questions. They are wondering what would happen if they stopped obeying. Then we must remind them why they obey," a Kethvari representative said. "Make examples. Destroy a few rebellious populations. Show them what happens to those who defy us." Zoltan's crystalline form flickered with something that might have been frustration. "We have been making examples for 2 years. It is not working. Every world we destroy creates more enemies. Every species we punish becomes more determined to resist. We are not crushing the rebellion, we are feeding it." "What do you suggest?" the Siraki representative demanded. "That we simply accept defiance? That we allow the humans to spread their poison throughout the galaxy?" "I suggest," Zolan said carefully, "that we consider whether this war can still be won through force alone. The humans have taught the galaxy something dangerous. Even if we destroy them completely, that lesson will remain. Other species will remember what they saw. Other species will try what humans tried." The chamber fell silent. No one wanted to hear what Zolan was implying. "We must defeat the humans quickly and decisively," he continued, "and then we must change how we rule. We must give the galaxy reasons to follow us that go beyond fear. Otherwise, we will face this same crisis again and again, forever." The council did not like this advice. They did not want to change. They wanted to crush the humans and return to the comfortable order they had known for millennia. But they agreed on one thing. The humans needed to be defeated quickly. General Stone had been waiting for this moment. He stood in the command center of Fortress Sol, the massive defense station orbiting Earth. Around him, officers monitored displays showing human forces across all remaining systems. The picture was grim. While humanity held only 7 systems now, they had less than 1,000 ships still operational. Their production capacity had been cut by more than half. But Stone was smiling. "They're assembling everything they have," he told Secretary General Okonkwo. "Our intelligence indicates over 40,000 ships gathering at Nexus Station." Nexus Station was the Council's primary shipyard, a structure larger than most moons that had been producing warships for 30,000 years. It was the heart of the Council's military power. Without it, they could not replace their losses. Without it, this war would become much harder for them to sustain. 40,000 ships, Okonkwo repeated, and we have less than 1,000. Which is exactly what they expect us to focus on, Stone replied. They expect us to be terrified by the numbers. They expect us to retreat, to hide, to wait for them to come to us. They do not expect us to attack. Okonkwo studied his face. "You want to hit Nexus Station. I want to do more than hit it. I want to destroy it." The plan had been in development for over a year. It was called Operation Prometheus, named after the mythological figure who stole fire from the gods. Stone explained the details. Human ships would create diversionary attacks across multiple systems, drawing Council attention away from Nexus Station. Meanwhile, a strike force of 300 vessels would use a newly developed stealth system to approach the station undetected. But the ships were not the real weapon. The real weapon was what they carried. 40,000 automated drones, Stone said, each one loaded with a quantum disruption warhead. They're not designed to survive. They're designed to overwhelm. Quantum disruption warheads, Okonkwo said. I don't remember approving those. You approved the general category of unconventional weapons. Dr. Tanaka's team developed these in the past 6 months. They disrupt the fabric of space-time itself. The effect is localized, but within that localization, nothing survives. Okonkwo considered the implications. 40,000 warheads, 40,000 tiers in reality. It was the kind of weapon that would have been considered unthinkable before the war. But the war had changed what was thinkable. What are the odds of success? Stone's smile faded. Honestly, maybe 30%. Nexus Station is the most heavily defended location in the galaxy. 4,000 ships guard it permanently. Even with the diversions, or they will have overwhelming force. And if we fail, then we lose 300 ships and 40,000 irreplaceable drones. Our offensive capability will be effectively gone. We will only be able to defend from that point forward. Okonkwo was quiet for a long moment. We cannot win a defensive war, she finally said. If we only defend, we only delay. Eventually they wear us down. Eventually they win. Yes, Stone agreed. Then we have no choice. We have to take the risk. The operation launched 3 weeks later. Human fleets attacked Council positions across 6 different systems simultaneously. The attacks were fierce but not suicidal, designed to look like serious offensive operations rather than diversions. Council commanders responded by pulling forces from across the galaxy to counter the threats. Meanwhile, thus the stealth force approached Nexus Station. Commander Sarah Chen led the strike force from the bridge of the destroyer Prometheus. She was the granddaughter of Ambassador Wei Chen, who had delivered humanity's declaration of war. The ambassador had died 2 years ago, killed when a Council fleet bombarded her transport ship. Sarah had volunteered for this mission the day she heard the news. The stealth systems worked better than expected. Council sensors swept right past the human ships without detecting them. The fleet crept closer and closer to the massive station, hiding in the shadows of asteroids and debris. When they reached optimal range, Chen gave the order. Launch all drones. Target distribution pattern Alpha. May God have mercy on us all. 40,000 drones erupted from the human ships. They spread out in a carefully calculated pattern, designed to saturate the station's defenses from every direction at once. The Council defenders reacted immediately. Point defense batteries opened fire, filling space with energy beams and kinetic projectiles. Hundreds of drones were destroyed in the first seconds. Hundreds more in the seconds that followed. But there were too many. The defenses could not track them all, could not destroy them all. The drones that survived slipped through the gaps and accelerated toward their targets. The first warheads detonated against the station's shield generators. Reality itself seemed to scream as space-time tore apart. The shields flickered and died. More drones poured through the gaps. They struck the shipyard sections, the power plants, the command centers. Each detonation created a sphere of nothing where matter and energy ceased to exist. Chen watched through her view screen as Nexus Station came apart. 30,000 years of work, 50,000 years of accumulated knowledge and resources, all of it vanishing in the flash of quantum fire. The council ships guarding the station tried to fight back, but the chaos was too great. Their commanders were dead, their communication networks destroyed, their formations shattered. Some fled. Others fought blindly, striking at anything that moved. 6 hours after the attack began, it was over. Nexus Station was gone. Not damaged, not disabled, but completely annihilated. The Council had lost its ability to produce new capital ships for years, perhaps decades. The human strike force had lost 112 ships out of 300. Commander Chen's Prometheus was among the survivors. As she ordered the retreat, she allowed herself a moment to look back at the expanding cloud of debris that had once been the heart of the Council's power. "Grandmother would have appreciated this," she said quietly. Across the galaxy, the news spread with impossible speed. The Council's greatest fortress had fallen. The invincible shipyards had been destroyed. Humanity had struck at the heart of their enemy and won. High Arbiter Zolan received the reports alone in his private chamber. He read them carefully, absorbing every detail, every casualty figure, every tactical analysis. When he finished, he sat in silence for a long time. He had lived for 3,000 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had guided the Council through countless challenges. He had always believed that he understood war, understood conflict, understood what made species succeed or fail. Now he realized he understood nothing. The humans should have been broken by now. They had lost millions of people. They had lost most of their territory. They were outnumbered beyond any reasonable measure. By every calculation, they should have surrendered or been destroyed. Instead, they had destroyed Nexus Station. How? How did they find the strength? How did they find the will? What drove them to keep fighting when every rational analysis said they had already lost? Zolan searched his memories for any species that had shown such determination. He found none. In 50,000 years of Council history, no species had ever fought like this. And suddenly he understood. When the Council had always seen humanity as a threat because of their expansion, their aggression, their refusal to accept limits. They had been right to see them as a threat, but they had been wrong about the nature of that threat. Humanity was not dangerous because they wanted to destroy. They were dangerous because they refused to be destroyed. They would fight any enemy, accept any cost, endure any suffering, as long as fighting meant a chance to survive. They did not calculate odds or measure resources. They simply refused to stop. They would burn their own worlds, sacrifice their own children, tear apart the fabric of space-time itself, all for the chance to live free. This was not a species that could be conquered. This was a species that could only be destroyed completely or accommodated. Zolan realized that he had known this since the day Ambassador Chen smiled at him and said humanity would fight. He had just not wanted to believe it. Now he had no choice. The Council faced a decision. They could continue the war and eventually destroy humanity, but the cost would be staggering. The rebellion among protectorate species would grow. The galaxy's faith in Council power would shatter. Even if they won, they would emerge weaker than they had been in millennia. Or they could do something that the Council had never done in 50,000 years. They could negotiate. Zolan summoned a meeting of the full Council. It was time for the galaxy to change. 3 years after Ambassador Chen spoke 7 words that shook the galaxy, the war came to an end. Not with a final battle, not with the destruction of Earth, not with the collapse of the Council. It ended with a message delivered through diplomatic channels that had been silent since the first day of fighting. The Galactic Council requested negotiations. Secretary General Amara Okonkwo received the message at Fortress Sol. She read it 3 times before she believed it was real. For 3 years, she had lived with the certainty that this war would end only when one side was completely destroyed. She had prepared herself for the possibility that humanity would be that side. Now the council wanted to talk. It could be a trap, General Stone warned, a way to make us lower our guard while they prepare another offensive. It could be, Okonkwo agreed, but we cannot refuse without learning more. Humanity has never backed down from a fight, but we have never refused a chance for peace either. She sent her reply. Humanity would meet with council representatives at a neutral location, with guarantees of safe passage for both sides. The meeting place was chosen carefully, a dead moon orbiting a forgotten star, far from any territory claimed by humans or council species. Neither side would have any advantage. Neither side would have any reason to fear. Okonkwo led the human delegation personally. She brought General Stone, Dr. Tanaka, and a dozen other officials who had guided humanity through the war. They traveled in a small convoy of ships, enough to show respect for the occasion, but not enough to appear threatening. The council sent High Arbiter Zolan. He came alone in a vessel barely larger than a shuttle. His crystalline form showed signs of age that had not been there 3 years ago. The inner light that had once pulsed with cold confidence now flickered with something more uncertain. The two delegations met in a structure that had been built specifically for this purpose. A simple room with a long table, chairs sized for human bodies, and an alcove where Zoltan could rest his crystalline form comfortably. No weapons were permitted, no recording devices either. Whatever was said in this room would stay in this room. Okonkwo took her seat at one end of the table. Zoltan positioned himself at the other. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Zoltan broke the silence. Before we begin, he said, I must ask you something. Something I have wondered about since the day your ambassador declared war. Ask, Okonkwo said. How did you know you could win? Okonkwo considered the question carefully before answering. We did not know, she said. When Ambassador Chen stood before your council and declared war, we had no certainty of victory. Our military advisors gave us perhaps a 10% chance of survival, let alone success. Zoltan's form flickered with confusion. Then why did you fight? Why did you choose near certain destruction over surrender? Because surrender was not survival, Okonkwo replied. Your council offered us existence as protectorates, but that was not life. Not for humanity. We have spent our entire history fighting against those who would control us. Kings and emperors, corporations and governments, anyone who tried to tell us what we could become. She leaned forward. You offered us safety in exchange for chains. We chose danger in exchange for freedom. It was not a rational choice by your standards, but we are not rational creatures by your standards. We are humans. We would rather die standing than live on our knees. Zoltan was silent for a long time. I have lived for 3,000 years, he finally said. I have seen countless species rise and fall. I have watched civilizations that seemed invincible crumble to dust. I believed I understood the nature of intelligent life. I believed I understood what made species succeed or fail. His crystalline form dimmed. I was wrong. I did not understand humans. I do not believe I fully understand them even now. You are something new, something the galaxy has not seen before. We are not so different from others, Okonkwo said. We simply refuse to accept limits that others accept. Perhaps that is our greatest strength. Perhaps it is our greatest weakness. We do not know yet. It is both, Zoltan said. I have come to believe that it is both. He straightened, his form brightening slightly. Let us discuss terms. The negotiations lasted for 7 days. Both sides argued, debated, compromised, and argued again. There were moments when it seemed the talks would collapse, when old grievances and fresh wounds threatened to derail everything. But both sides wanted peace. Both sides had learned the cost of war. And in the end, that desire was stronger than any disagreement. The final treaty contained several key provisions. First, the Council would grant humanity full recognition as a sovereign species. Not a protectorate, not a subject race, but an equal member of the galactic community. The human territory would be respected. Human laws would govern human worlds. No council species would interfere in human affairs without invitation. Second, all occupied human colonies would be returned. The council forces that had seized human worlds would withdraw. Refugees who had fled the fighting would be allowed to return home. The borders that existed before the war would be restored. Third, humanity would be offered a seat on the Galactic Council itself. Not as observers, not as junior members, but as full participants with voting rights equal to any other species. For the first time in 50,000 years, the Council would expand to include a new member. Fourth, humanity would share certain military technologies and tactical doctrines with the Council. Not the most dangerous weapons, like the quantum disruption warheads, but strategies and systems that could help the Council defend against future threats. In exchange, the Council would provide access to technologies that humanity had not yet developed. Okonkwo accepted all of these terms, but she had demands of her own. 3 species aided humanity during this war, she said. The Velthari provided intelligence on Council fleet movements. The Koss sabotaged supply lines at great risk to themselves. The Dreeth sheltered human refugees when we had nowhere else to send them. These species acted with courage and honor when it would have been easier to do nothing. She looked directly at Zoltan. I want them freed, full sovereignty, like what you are offering us. They have earned it. Zoltan hesitated. What she was asking had never been done before. No protectorate species had ever been granted independence. The precedent it would set could destabilize the entire council structure. But he also knew that refusing would doom the negotiations. The humans would not accept peace if it meant abandoning their allies. The council will need to vote on this, he said carefully. I cannot promise the outcome. Then promise me you will advocate for it, Okonkwo replied. Promise me you will use whatever influence you have to make it happen. These species trusted us. We will not betray that trust. Zoltan was quiet for a moment. Then his crystalline form pulsed with something that might have been respect. You would risk peace for others who are not even your own kind. They fought beside us. They bled beside us. That makes them our kind. The High Arbiter considered this. In 3,000 years, no leader had ever spoken to him with such conviction. No leader had ever demanded concessions not for their own benefit, but for others who could offer nothing in return. Perhaps this was what made humans different. Perhaps this was why they could not be conquered. I will advocate for the liberation of the 3 species, Zoltan said finally. I cannot guarantee success, but I will use all my influence to make it happen. You have my word. Okonkwo nodded. Then we have an agreement. The treaty was signed the following day. Both delegations recorded their agreement and copies were transmitted across the galaxy. The war was officially over. But before the humans departed, Zoltan asked to speak with Okonkwo privately. They stood together on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. With a dead moon hung beneath them, and beyond it, the eternal darkness of space stretched in every direction. I want to tell you something, Zoltan said. Something I have never told anyone. Okonkwo waited. The Council has existed for 50,000 years because we learned to identify threats and eliminate them before they could grow. We have destroyed hundreds of species, thousands perhaps. We kept the galaxy stable, but we also kept it frozen. No new ideas, no new voices, no change of any kind. He paused. I told myself it was necessary. I told myself it was for the greater good. But when I watched humanity fight, when I saw what you were willing to sacrifice for freedom, I began to wonder. How many species like yours did we destroy? How many could have contributed something valuable to the galaxy? If we had given them the chance? Okonkwo did not answer. She could not. The weight of what Zoltan was describing was too great for simple words. We called you dangerous, Zoltan continued. We said your traits could not be allowed to mature. But perhaps we were wrong. Perhaps the traits we feared are exactly what the galaxy needs. Courage, determination, the refusal to accept limits, the willingness to fight for what matters. His crystalline form flickered. The Council has grown old and tired. We have forgotten what it means to struggle. We have forgotten what it means to grow. Perhaps humanity can remind us. Okonkwo turned to face him. That sounds almost like hope. Perhaps it is, Zoltan admitted. I did not expect to find hope at the end of this war, but you have given it to me nonetheless. 1 year later, Ambassador Sarah Chen took her seat in the great chamber of Thesser Prime. The chamber had not changed since her grandmother stood there and declared war. The same platforms floated at different heights. The same 17 species watched from their positions of power. The same High Arbiter, Zolan, presided over the proceedings, but everything else had changed. Sarah sat on a new platform, positioned at the same level as the oldest council members. 3 other new platforms had been added as well, occupied by representatives of the Velthari, the Kos, and the Dreeth. The species who had helped humanity had earned their freedom, just as Okonkwo had demanded. The Galactic Council now had 21 members instead of 17. For the first time in 50,000 years, new voices would be heard. Sarah looked around the chamber and remembered her grandmother's stories. Ambassador Wei Jin had described this place as terrifying and alien, designed to make visitors feel small and powerless. Sarah understood what she had meant. The architecture was still intimidating, the alien species still strange and overwhelming. But Sarah did not feel small. She felt like she belonged. High Arbiter Zolan called the session to order. "We gather today to welcome new members to the council," he announced. "For the first time in millennia, our family grows. Let us hope this is the beginning of a new era for all species." He turned to Sarah. "Representative Chen, your species has earned its place among us through trials that would have broken any other race. You have shown courage, determination, and honor. The council welcomes humanity." Sarah stood. She thought about everything her people had sacrificed to reach this moment. The billions who had died, the worlds that had been destroyed, the families that had been torn apart. The weight of that sacrifice pressed down on her shoulders. But she also thought about what they had gained. Freedom, respect, a voice in the future of the galaxy. Her grandmother had died fighting for these things. So had millions of others. They had not died for nothing. "High Arbiter," Sarah said, "members of the council, humanity is honored to join this assembly. We come not as conquerors, not as victims, but as partners. We have learned much from this war. We have learned the cost of conflict and the value of cooperation." She paused. "We have also learned something about ourselves. We learned that we are stronger than we knew. We learned that we can face impossible odds and refuse to surrender. We learned that the universe respects those who fight for their place in it." Sarah looked around the chamber. The alien faces that had once seemed so threatening now seemed merely different. Not enemies, but neighbors. Not threats, but opportunities. "The galaxy is vast and old," she continued. "Humanity is young and small. We have much to learn from species who have existed far longer than us. But perhaps we have something to teach as well. Perhaps our determination, our refusal to accept limits, our belief that the future is not yet written, perhaps these things have value." She smiled. It was the same smile her grandmother had worn when she declared war, but now it carried different meaning. "As humanity is ready to work with the council. We are ready to build a future together, a future where species are judged not by their age or their power, but by their contributions to the common good. A future where new voices are welcomed instead of silenced. A future worthy of the sacrifices that brought us here." The chamber was silent when she finished. Then slowly the alien representatives began to respond. The Morpheans rippled with color. The Serachii raised their crests. The Kethvari clicked in what might have been approval. Even Zoltan's crystalline form pulsed with warm light. "Well spoken, Representative Chen," he said. "Your grandmother would be proud." Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes, but she did not let them fall. Not here, not now. "Thank you, High Arbiter. She would be proud of all of us." The session continued. Moving on to other business. Trade agreements and territorial disputes and the thousand small matters that kept the galaxy running. Sarah participated in all of it, learning the rhythms of council politics, understanding how decisions were made. It would take years, perhaps generations, for humanity to truly find its place among the stars. There would be conflicts and misunderstandings and moments when old hatreds threatened to resurface. The path forward would not be easy, but Sarah was not worried. Humanity had faced impossible odds before. They had been told they could not win, could not survive, could not matter. They had proven everyone wrong. They would do it again. As the session ended and the representatives began to disperse, Sarah remained at her platform for a moment. She looked out at the chamber where her grandmother had delivered humanity's defiance to the galaxy. She thought about all the events that had led to this moment: the ultimatum, the declaration of war, the battles and losses and sacrifices, the final negotiations that had seemed impossible until they suddenly were not. Humanity had come so far in just a few years, from a minor species facing extinction to full members of the galactic community, from victims to equals, from prey to partners. But Sarah knew this was only the beginning. The real work was just starting, building bridges between species who had been enemies for millennia, healing wounds that had been inflicted across generations, creating a future that was better than the past. It would not be easy. Nothing worth doing ever was. Sarah smiled one last time and stepped off her platform. She had a lot of work to do. Humanity was counting on her, and she would not let them down. Outside the chamber, through the massive windows of Thesser Prime, the stars burned with ancient light. They had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. They had seen species come and go like waves on a cosmic shore. They did not care about the small creatures who struggled beneath their gaze, but the small creatures cared about each other. And that, in the end, was what mattered. Humanity had found its place among the stars, not through conquest or submission, but through courage and determination and the simple refusal to give up. They had taught the galaxy something it had forgotten long ago. The future was not written by the strong or the ancient, or it was written by those who refused to accept that it was already decided, and humanity had never been very good at accepting limits. The stars waited, cold and patient and eternal, but they would not wait alone anymore. Humanity was here, and they were not going anywhere.